So for quite a few months, people knew things were going wrong. People knew that Harry and Meghan were not happy and that had fallen out with their family. But no one really expected how big a story this would be.
Back at this time in January, it's the start of a new year, we knew there had been the rumblings of a winter of discontent. They'd got back from a tour of South Africa, which I'd been on with Meghan and Harry and little Archie. And, you know, I think to all intents and purposes, that tour had gone very well. Until the final day of the tour, when Harry used a public speaking opportunity to have a crack at the media for how they treated his wife and to sort of really be very dismissive of the press pack who travelled around South Africa with the couple and their young child. So I think we all had an indication that things were not as well as they might have been. But I don't think anyone was expecting that, you know, at the start of the new year, we were going to get this incredible announcement.
They took 6 weeks off and didn't spend Christmas with the royal family, which obviously raised a lot of eyebrows. And then just a few days after all of that, when they'd finished their holiday, came the bombshell.
So the Sun had the biggest royal scoop of the century on their hands. It was not only that they'd fallen out with William or that Meghan wasn't talking to Catherine, they wanted to leave the country. They were stepping down as working royals and they were going abroad. We splashed it on the front page, big headline, pictures of Harry and Meghan saying we are off again. Within a couple of hours, Harry and Meghan did confirm our story, and then we have the front page of the decade with the headline Megxit. And it was probably, I would suggest, the biggest exclusive, definitely this century, relating to the royal family. It was huge.
I remember going straight to the Entertainment Tonight studios to cover this story, trying to reach every member of the Palace press office that I could, and every single line going to voicemail. And it was very evident that these Palace courtiers were locked in crisis talks because they weren't expecting the announcement either. It was absolutely thrown onto them. I think Harry and Meghan have subsequently tried to paint their own narrative that makes it appear that it wasn't quite the bombshell that it was, but I was told by palace courtiers very close to the late Queen Elizabeth II that she was absolutely blindsided by this. The courtier who I spoke to described the talks that were going on between the Queen and her grandson as embryonic, certainly not a fully hatched plan ready to be executed. So to say that the Queen and the palace were caught off guard was something of an understatement.
It was clear there was a lot to discuss, and the royals very, very quickly, by mid-January, just a few days after this announcement, had arranged to gather at Sandringham for what we quickly dubbed the Sandringham Summit. And the day that that happened, it was a frenzy like we hadn't seen for quite some time. There were the media camped out outside Sandringham just waiting for news of what in the world this new Harry and Meghan royal in and out plan was going to look like.
So Harry and Meghan have been quite petulant. They put a statement out saying that they were leaving. They accused of blindsiding the Queen, of not letting her know of their plans in full before they announced it on their social media site. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh at the time, he was so furious with what was happening, he didn't even turn up to the Sandringham Summit.
I think there was a sense, certainly for the Queen, for Prince Charles and for Prince William, that they were going to sort of talk Harry out of this moment of madness, make him see reason and sort things out. But Harry was absolutely resolute.
I don't think they thought it had the impact it did, the couple. I think they thought they would be able to say, look, we're not the frontline couple, we're getting a lot of attention, we want the heat to come off us a little bit. And I think that he misread the rooms, really, misread the way that the royal family is. I think he thought he could sweet talk his grandmother, the Queen.
Here's Prince Harry and Meghan saying, well, we still want to work for the royal family, we still want to represent the Queen, but we also want to have the opportunity to earn our own money and to become commercially independent. And I think that's where, you know, I think the Queen saw a lot of red flags in Harry and Meghan's proposal, but that was the key one. Absolutely
no way was the Queen going to back down on the commercialisation of the monarchy in a way that it was so overt and it's for personal gain. There's no way she would have allowed that.
The Queen's opinion was very much that either you were in the royal family or you were out, and this sort of halfway house that Harry was proposing had never worked in the past, really wasn't feasible, and that this sort of outline of what Harry and Meghan saw their future being, which was, by the way, all over their brand new website, was essentially people thinking, well, you want to have your cake and eat it.
It's so difficult to know what Meghan's motivation is because she's quite mendacious, actually. I mean, she said she never knew who Harry was when she met him. I mean, come on. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Oh, I didn't even know anything about the royal family. There's photographs of her standing outside the Buckingham Palace. What did she think it was, a post office? You know, I think she had a plan to monetize things for her early on, actually. Whatever hopes Harry had, and they were high, I think, it was never going to happen. She knew that the monarchy is more important than one individual, and that's why she acted as she did. They had the Diana experience, Diana, her true story, which was an absolute bombshell at the time. I think they knew he was Diana's son, and they knew exactly how much damage he could cause, and they also know he was quite capable of pressing the nuclear button.
At the end of the Sandringham summit, the agreement was essentially that Harry and Meghan would leave. There was no budging Harry. He'd clearly made his mind up. The Queen's instructions was that this needed to be wrapped up very quickly. She did not want this dripping into the press. And within a matter of hours, actually, of the summit coming to a close that afternoon, we received a statement, quite an unprecedented statement, actually, out of Buckingham Palace, expressing the Queen's regret at Harry and Meghan leaving, but her acceptance that it was their wish and that a plan was going to be formulated for their departure.
But what's really, really important to note is that that was never what Harry and Meghan had pitched. So clearly it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to be half in and half out. They wanted to earn their own money in some ways, but they also wanted to be part of the institution and representing the monarchy. So all of a sudden, they're making up policy on the fly of what the rest of their life was going to look like because the plan that had been hashed out wasn't their initial idea. And clearly, they hadn't worked out all the finer details of what that was actually going to look like, to be fully out of the royal family.
I don't think it's implausible that those key players at the table realised even at that point that actually the end game was probably going to be California. But I think the exposure into the private lives of the most senior royals has been unprecedented, and I don't think it was anything that Charles, William, or indeed the late Queen could have or would have predicted.